one of the great fool victims of history. For you have accepted the role of king for a day. And who but a fool would do that? But you will be revered and anointed as a king. You will undergo death and rebirth. Resurrection, if you like.
Oh, God! Oh, Jesus Christ!
The rebirth, sadly, will not be yours, but that of our crop.
Oh, my God! Christ! No! No!
For years, I have been arguing that one of, perhaps even the most beloved and charismatic characters in all of cinema is Bernie Lomax, protagonist of 1989's Weekend at Bernie's, and at whose the titular weekend takes place. He is adored by the film's denizens of Hampton Island, revered by his two employees, the oafs Richard and Larry. He would return in 1993's Weekend at Bernie's 2, taking his wassailing jubilee to the Caribbean and delighting audiences anew. There is one perplexing twist, however. Bernie, my dear listener, is a corpse. A dead man, if you will. Yet how can we reconcile this seeming paradox? The irresistible, vivacious charms of this lifeless, stiffened husk of a man. I submit that the man Bernie is a human sacrifice whose death placates the thirsts of whatever heathen deity reigns over the Isle of Hampton. The mystery cult that dwells there celebrates and exalts him, for it is then permitted to frolic and luxuriate in an opulent oasis, while the rest of the world swelters under the furious heat of indiscriminate damnation. In life, Bernie indulged in hedonism and corruption. Foolishly, he has accepted the role of king for a day, living carelessly for the present, chasing status and vanity, stealing and hoarding his luxuries in his extravagant skyscraper office and in his palatial beach house situated atop the largest dune on the island. When his hubris catches up to him and the expiration of his prosperity looms, he attempts to prolong the inevitable with a sacrifice of his subservient acolytes, the buffoons Richard and Larry. However, as the fool, Bernie lacks all respect for the proper rites of sacrifice. He invites these two unsuspecting Lomaxes to visit him for the titular weekend, and there he tempts them to carouse as kings for a day themselves. yet he plans to have them killed shortly after their arrival, before any feasting or ceremony, thereby forgoing the requisite pageantry and angering the gods afresh. And it is Bernie who is offered up instead in an ironic reversal. As you know, it is death that fuels life. In the city of the damned, people dwell in a stifling purgatory, neither alive nor dead. Here, death is false, and so too must be life. The Cretans, Richard and Larry, scoff at a mugger's threats, recognizing them as weightless. They both work at a life insurance company whose payouts are premised on fraud, fraudulent lives and fraudulent deaths. Richard recognizes that death is essential to continue any cycle, to break him free from his wretched stasis. But death is absent here. Thus, his primary, indeed his only gambit in pursuit of a romance with Gwen is to lie and to fabricate deaths. Deaths of fictional aunts and the fictional deaths of his very much living parents. Separated from the city by a Stygian ferry, the Isle of Hampton is a land of equal parts life and equal parts death. Here, Bernie's demise immediately triggers an island-spanning floating party, a life-affirming Bacchanalia, a tireless orgy of carnal pleasures. The revelers, the idiots, Richard and Larry among them, partake of Bernie's liquors and caviar, usurping his life force to renew their own. Bernie, though he is quite dead at this point, is, as the tagline prophesies, the life of the party. Stripped of his own animus, he is nevertheless enchanted as a totem of vitality and virility. Like Osiris, his death marks the unending cycle of renewal, like the seasonal flooding of the Nile River, or like the ebb and the flow of the tide. Here I remind you how Osiris was murdered and dismembered, his scattered pieces cast into the Nile and washing up into the reeds, where they were reassembled by his lover Isis, who then mystically revived him long enough to impregnate her with their son Horus, the protector of Egypt. In parallel, Bernie's corpse washes ashore and is thereafter seduced by his lover Tina, who presumably is impregnated with his immortal seed, sustaining the vitality of their beach paradise. Incidentally, I have repeatedly pitched a sequel, Weekend at the Son of Bernie's, premised on the stillborn offspring of this coupling, but Hollywood rebuffed me. It is ultimately a very conservative town, this Hollywood. According to myth, when the ancient Athenians rejected Dionysus, the hedonistic fertility god cursed them with a plague upon the male genitalia, until they recanted and succumbed to his mystery cult, annually commemorating the scourge and restoration with a procession of phalloi, the ceremonial penis sculptures of antiquity. The dunces, Richard and Larry, like the other cursed inhabitants of the city, are sterile and impotent, in contrast to the Bacchic Bernie, brimming as he is with phallic power and potency. And his death only magnifies it, like a sexual supernova, disseminating this concentrated erotic energy across the island and reinvigorating the loins of his brethren. The lighthouse lighthouse, a towering phallus ejaculating its aphrodisiac impetus upon the surrounding roisterers, is a direct symbol of Bernie's carcass. Richard surmises that the lighthouse, absent a living keeper, has lost its romantic potential. In the same way he, and you if you're being honest, underestimates the lifeless Bernie's prowess and influence. Richard is proven wrong about the both of them when the lighthouse, as Bernie's proxy, blasts him full on with its radiant sexuality, nearly killing him. The perilous transaction ultimately proves worthwhile as Richard, imbued with but a morsel of Bernie's erotic power, is at last welcomed into the fold of the Epicurean cult. A common misreading of the film involves the young boy who repeatedly tries and fails to bury Bernie on the beach, misinterpreting this as a comedic denial of funerary rites, perhaps as a slapstick homage to Antigone, who was forbidden from burying her brother Dionysus by their uncle Creon. But this reading misses the fact that the boy is an avatar of the land, and after the successful Rejuvenation Festival, he makes his first attempt to bury Bernie and fully reclaim his essence. It is only by the intervention of the hayseeds, Richard and Larry, that the interment is undone. These boors wish to plunder Bernie's vitality and hoard it for themselves. The land lashes out at them in reply, as do the other residents of the island, scolding these imbeciles, Richard and Larry, for attempting to smuggle the consecrated carcass away from the island and across the waters in violation of divine law.
That's illegal. What you're doing is illegal.
Fate thwarts their profane theft, their hubris, and like Icarus, they are thrust back to the island. There they are forced to return the Bernie offering to his temple, where it is ultimately reclaimed by the land, as the young boy reappears to cover it with the hallowed sands of Hampton Isle. On the other hand, in the traditions of Persephone and Adonis, Bernie straddles the border of life and death, splitting residence between their realms. A perfect fusion of the competing drives of Eros and Thanatos. Following his ritual murder, his soul was taken to the underworld, one assumes. Yet his life force was reclaimed by his neighbors, his fellow cultists. When their orgiastic frenzy subsides, Bernie's wraith may rest. But it is never fully gone. He is part of an ancient, never-ending cycle, and from the next summer solstice until the harvest moon, Bernie's spectre will inevitably re-emerge, undulating to the lustful throbbing of the drums, leading his devotees in a feast of debauch, as a wine-soaked embodiment of the uninhibited generative libido that birthed and sustains us all. Thank you.
And on that bed there was a girl, and on that girl there was a man, and from that man there was a seed, and from that seed there was a boy, and from that boy there was a man, and for that man there was a grave, and from that grave there grew a tree. And on that bed there was a girl, and on that girl there was a man, and from that man there was a seed, and from that seed there was a boy, and from that boy there was a man, and for that man there was a grave, and from that grave there grew a tree. and on that tree